Sleep apnea is probably more widespread than we think. The most common form of sleep apnea is obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, which can lead to poor sleep, choking, or snoring. And if left undiagnosed and untreated, this can lead to serious health conditions and in some cases also cost you your life. So we cannot take it easy. We need to know about it. To talk about their individual experiences, we have two guests today, Anuradha Bhasin and Aniruddha Banerjee. They will talk about symptoms, how they got diagnosed in their case, and what treatments are they following. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Manju.
Thank you, Manju. What a wonderful opportunity. I'm glad you're doing this show.
Yes.
Thank you. So if I could request Aniruddha to first speak about sleep apnea. How was your experience? What are the symptoms? I personally know very little about it.
Yes, you're so right about that, because this is not something that's very widely understood or appreciated, at least not until recently. Who among us has not had this following experience? Let's go back to our childhoods. And you're trying to go to sleep in a darkened room somewhere, or maybe even during the afternoon, and all of a sudden your sleep is interrupted by loud snoring from either the same room or the room next to you.
Yes.
And there is, I remember this phenomenon so often because we used to have family get-togethers, and there's always one person, or sometimes more than one person, that would bring down the roof during the nighttime because of their snoring.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was either mildly annoying or abusing, depending on your age. It doesn't matter very much. But it has such serious health consequences that, it's no laughing matter anymore.
Right.
And that was brought home to me in the late 1990s when a good colleague and friend of mine actually died from sleep apnea.
Yes.
Now, if that is something that can happen, and I believe it does happen with some regularity, it's not all that rare.
Right.
It's because this serious health condition went undiagnosed and untreated, as you said, Manju.
Yeah.
So sometime in the first decade of this century, I would say around 2005 or 6, I noticed that, of course, when I was fast asleep, I couldn't make that out myself. But I noticed that after a while, my wife would sneak off to another bedroom just to be able to catch a good night's sleep.
Right.
And when I would ask her about the reasons for leaving our bed, she would say, "You're snoring too much, and it's impossible to sleep in those conditions." I laughed it off at first because, the older you get, the more likely you are to snore your head off. But after a while, in consultation with my doctor, I discovered that this was not a laughing matter, as I said before. So I went for a sleep study at a hospital, spent the night while they observed and measured my sleep patterns. How often would I wake up in the middle of the sleep, even though I didn't realize it? I was still waking up. And how often I would start to choke or stop breathing or anything like that. And I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. Those were two words that sent a chill through my spine. It was not something I had expected, but at the same time, I recognized immediately how serious it was because of the personal experience I had with my friend.
If I could ask you, Aniruddha, sorry for interrupting, not all snoring is because of sleep apnea. So how did you really know that you had to go for the sleep study?
Let's understand what sleep apnea is. It is when you lie down and you're at rest, the muscles at the back of your throat also go into a resting position or they relax. And that, both in the back of the throat and the side of the mouth and the tongue, they get in the way of the air passage that allows you to breathe. And that reduces the airflow and the snoring that happens as a result is basically your body trying to breathe through an obstruction. That's why this is called obstructive sleep apnea. And in the worst of situations, you can temporarily stop breathing. And in rare situations, if you stop breathing long enough, you're oxygen deprived, you could die. You could have a cardiac arrest. So my condition was diagnosed along the lines that I mentioned earlier. They took measurements of the pattern of my sleep, how restfully I was sleeping. And if I was not sleeping restfully, how often I would wake up and how often I would go into this choking kind of situation. When it was diagnosed, there was only one recourse to it, and I'm sure Anu will fill us in on her experience, which was the CPAP machine.
Right.
Now, CPAP machine is essentially something that people are now becoming more familiar with, to the extent that even security checks at airports recognize that little bag that you're carrying with you,
Right.
and they pass you through. It's becoming pretty commonplace. But at that time, it was a big, clunky machine that you held on to, and it made a big racket in the middle of the night. And I'm not sure it was a good way to replace the snoring, but at least you didn't have to start choking in the middle of your sleep.
Right.
Why is it so dangerous, apart from the fact that it causes some kind of respiratory failure? It has many health consequences, like blood pressure can be raised, arrhythmia, sudden death, obviously, is something I mentioned. But it can also be brought on. I mean, there are two things that one has to keep track of. Why does it even happen in the first place? And who does it happen to? It happens to people generally. I mean, this is not going to be a blanket summary of who gets it, who is at most risk for this. But it generally happens with elderly males.
Right.
It does happen with women too. It does happen with women too, but we all know
Totally.
our snoring uncles. So the elderly males who are a little bit overweight, and I have to admit, at the time I was diagnosed, I was overweight.
Right.
So I had to go on a diet and trim myself down a little. And it also is brought on by things like diabetes and some other smoking and other complicating factors.
Can I just jump in here and say something about the negative effects? You mentioned stroke and stuff like that, Andy. That's absolutely right. But there's the other effect of being sleep deprived. So during the day, you're feeling very sleepy. So in fact, my cousin who came to stay with me is a doctor, he's a surgeon, and he said he was doing his surgery half asleep, you know? And that used to happen to me too. I would be sleep deprived because had a very fitful sleep.
Right.
And so that's the other effect that through the day, if you're driving, you might doze off, or so those
Yeah.
are the other effects that you might have.
So I think this is a good time, Anu, if you could share your experience. Were you in India at that time, and did you have the sleep study done in India? So how was
Yeah.
your experience?
So I have been in India for the last so many years, and I knew I had apnea. I knew I had a snoring problem. I thought it was like everyone else, but then I realized it's worse. As you said, it's like one of those sleep uncles or sleep aunties are just loud, foregone, like, snoring. And I didn't know what to do about it. So I went, um, and I didn't take it very seriously, except for the embarrassment, actually,
Right.
frankly. I would snore loudly in a movie hall or in a plane, and my daughter would nudge me and say, just wake up.
Yeah.
So when I did my research about 10 years ago, the place I could go to was this government hospital, Safdarjung.
Right.
It's the only one, the sleep center. And it had a very good sleep doctor. But when I went there were like 30 people in the room listening to what everyone had to say. And I would have had to spend the night in the hospital where they plugged you in and they took your measurements, as Andy had mentioned.
Right.
somehow I just didn't appeal to me to be there alone. It put me off completely. So I kept putting off the whole thing, and I just didn't know what to do, where to go. And then my cousin came and stayed with me, showed me the machine, and I saw the machine was made by this, it's called ResMed. It's a Philips machine. I think that's the one that's most popular. It's made in
Right.
Australia. And so I did some research and I found out there was a ResMed marketing center here. I called them up and I said, look, I want to buy the machine because my cousin had convinced me that I needed it.
Yeah.
And they said, look, we're marketing it, but we do it to professionals. You should not actually just buy the
Take it.
machine and do it on your own, not under supervision. And then they recommended 3 or 4 doctors. By then, I think 3 or 4 people had entered the scene. I'm sure now there are many more. This is about
Right.
7, 8 years ago. And I chose the one that was closest to me and that would come home and do a sleep study. I
Okay.
just feel good going to some, anonymous
Yeah.
center somewhere.
So on the sleep study, actually a question for both of you. I'm still unclear. How is a sleep study done?
So in
You
my
are
case, what
hooked
they
up to,
did is they plugged me onto various things. I'm sure it's the
yeah,
same for you, Andy. There was a man sitting
yes,
outside my room monitoring things. And then first he started off without the masks. And
Right.
so I did that sleep study and he measured how many apnea, sort of holding breath symptoms were occurring. They call something where you hold your breath, actually. More important
Mm.
than the snoring is the holding of your breath.
Okay.
Then he hooked me onto 2 or 3 different types of masks to see which one I could tolerate. There's a slightly claustrophobic feeling initially, and I think that puts a lot of people off. And
Mm.
then with those different masks, he would wake you up, measure, and then again rewire you up and do the study. So it was all night. It was a horrible night,
Yeah.
sleeplessness. So Andy, did you have the same experience, or was yours more pleasant?
almost very similar in many ways. Of course, I did have it done at a hospital where I was the only person in the room, mercifully. Um, and I got hooked up to various machines, and people would come and take measurements. Now, this happened a while ago, so I may not recall everything, every little detail, all that well. But I didn't get too many masks to try on at that point. Once they diagnosed my condition and they said I need a CPAP machine, that's when I went to. I also have a ResMed machine, by the way, so we have
That's
the
a
same
good
machine
one.
or a similar machine. Uh, I went to the local ResMed office here, not too far from where I live, and they tried on for me various masks to see the fit and so forth. And the pressure itself. Remember, CPAP actually injects air into your mouth so as to keep the muscles from slacking off too much and keeping the airways open. The pressure at which that air is injected is determined by the doctor
Hmm.
after having looked at all the measurements and everything that had been taken. It's not, as you said, it's not something that you do yourself. It's the doctor that determines it. And then the machine itself is customized to be able to deliver air at that pressure. Now, typically, it starts off at low pressure, and then as the sleep progresses, the pressure becomes more and more intense.
Yeah.
And that's how, once you've fallen asleep, there is no let up in the pressure, and therefore there is no obstruction anymore when you sleep through the night. Now, the recommendation is that you use the CPAP machine for at least 4 hours a night, maybe longer, and that's no problem because we don't sleep just 4 hours a night. We sleep longer than that. And you're absolutely right, Anu, that the masks were a problem in the beginning.
Hmm.
I'm sure it's universal. It's not an easy
Uncomfortable
thing to
feeling.
try
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
So
And in fact, that's why there is a new product out of the market now called, uh, it's an implant. I'm forgetting, Inspire, I think is what
Yeah,
it's
which are
called.
just nose plugs, right? Which are just go into an.
It's an implant. It's an implant. It
Oh,
goes under
oh,
the skin.
oh,
And I am not absolutely certain of how it works, but it's being heavily advertised in the US. And implant takes away all the masks and everything.
wow.
So I'm not sure about the efficacy or the experience of using an implant, but the most common way to use a CPAP machine is with a mask.
right.
Now, of
So
course,
there
you
are
can
three
have a
types of
custom made.
masks. There are
On
three
the
types of masks.
on this
One is the nose and mouth.
Yeah.
One is just the nose, which is what I
Just the
use.
nose. Just
And
the
the
nose.
third one is just like plugs in your nostrils, right? Which one do you use,
Which is,
Andy?
I use the second and the third kind.
Okay, I just
Uh,
not using one.
the one that covers the nose, and the other one which I use for travel is the one that just goes into your nostrils. So
Yes, beauty is the new, there's a mini which you can travel with, which is a handy thing.
that's the one. Yeah,
And it's a handy
it is
little machine.
expensive.
They're all
It is pretty
expensive.
expensive.
Yeah.
So just
It is
on,
very expensive.
sorry, just on the
Sorry.
CPAP machine. Now, to a person like me who doesn't know much about it, I would worry about covering it up or having some obstruction of the machine and sleeping with it. But obviously, from the experiences that you're saying, is quite smooth. So, are you expected to use it every day, all
We
through the
want to
night?
use
You
it
said what?
every day. Am I
Correct.
right, Andy? I want to use it every day and every time I
You
sleep.
know,
So,
I
But
can't sleep without it.
I can't
yeah,
I
sleep
can't
without
sleep
it.
without it.
and
In
every
fact, that's the
day. And
terrifying part.
how long does the machine last? Do you have to replace it, or is it good for life once you buy it? The new products might
Well,
be coming out, but does it
the
have a
most
I get it
life?
recent,
serviced. I get it serviced twice a year, and mine's at least 7, 6, 7 years old. It's expensive, so you
yeah,
probably. And I changed the
I have
mask.
a
I've
similar.
replaced my mask. I've replaced my water tank, but not the machine. Machine's working fine.
Yeah, the machine that I currently use is about 10 years old, and it has broken down only once. Uh, During the time it was being repaired, I was given an identical machine as a loaner.
Right,
So there wasn't a break in service, so to speak. But these are pretty durable, pretty hardy. You can see that there is a mask and there's a tube that leads from the mask all the way to the machine itself. And on the right is the machine along with that tube.
right. And it's
And
covering only
this
the
is,
nose in this case.
In this
it's
case, yeah,
covering only the
he only
nose.
has the
Yes.
Yeah,
I
nose
mean,
nose mask.
you can have a bigger mask that covers the mouth as well, but
Mm.
nowadays I think most people favor just the nose being
Yes,
covered.
yes.
And there's a band around your head that keeps it from slipping off.
right,
So
And it's got a long
it's,
tube, so you can actually,
yes,
it's pretty good. You can move it in various directions because the tube allows you
absolutely.
to move. Yeah.
You can change sides when
Mm.
you're sleeping. You can
Mm.
sleep on your back. And, it becomes second nature
Yes,
right,
it's
after a
become
while.
really part of my life. The first thing I do
Yes.
when I check into a hotel is check the plugs to make sure that
Yes.
my plug fits, to make sure there's a place for my machine, put it next to me on the bed. But
right.
you know what happened to me recently, Andy, is that I was traveling to Arunachal where the electric supply was very erratic. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So I asked my cousin in England to send me a battery pack, and that's my
Okay.
new thing now. I charged it, and for 2 nights I
Yeah.
didn't have proper electricity, and I didn't want to chance it. So along with my little mini traveler and my mask, I had a little battery pack, and I had a great night's sleep. So
Well,
that's
That
my
that's
latest
such
toy,
a
resume
Anu,
toy.
forward, very forward looking in the way you
I
use it. So
know.
Anu,
yeah, yeah, it
that's a
makes sense.
good tip actually. If traveling within India and
Yes,
electricity can be a
yes,
problem, it's a
it's
good
huge.
tip to have the batteries.
I do have friends who find it very difficult to use the machine, although they've been prescribed it and I know that they've got severe apnea. And I feel very bad because there's a sense of claustrophobic. If you have claustrophobia of any extent, although I'm
Right,
mildly claustrophobic, you can't do it. Also, during the night, if you need to get up for some reason, you have to take the whole headgear off
right,
and go and then come back and put it on. So it's a bit off-putting. So there is all that paraphernalia that you have to do. But I can sleep six, and the machine tells you how many hours you've slept. So I sleep
right.
6 to 8 hours, and
Okay,
it tells you how
Yeah,
good you are.
it becomes second nature.
okay,
The way I look at it is that if it's going to help me get through the night without waking up or having some serious episode,
yeah,
then it's worthwhile keeping it on. And after a while, you
Totally.
don't feel it. It's like an extension of your body.
right,
Uh, One of the things that, as Anu mentioned, that her immediate concern when she's traveling is, will I have reliable electric supply to operate this? Well, in the US, that is less of a concern
yeah,
because electric supply is available everywhere. But when we check into a hotel room, my wife and I usually go hunting for the outlets first.
Right.
to see
Right.
which side of the bed who's going to take that,
That's it.
because I want to be near the outlet.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
those
my
are
first.
some
Yeah.
side concerns, but
Right.
apart from that, it's once you get. I've been using my CPAP machine for 18 years now, and I feel like, it's if I can prolong my life by maintaining some kind of stability in my sleep pattern,
Right.
it's a worthwhile investment to make. And all the pain that comes with it initially just goes away after a while.
Yeah.
No,
Of
I
for the
course, I'm not
pleasure of
claustrophobic, so I don't know if I would suffer from
just want to
claustrophobia.
say the pleasure of waking up, of having slept for 8 hours
Yeah.
after years of not having slept. Not only does it make you sleep well, it makes you be awake well also.
one more question. In terms of the sleep study, so which is the doctor that you go to? And secondly, in case there's something goes wrong with the machine, who sets up the things that Andy was saying in the beginning?
I got the recommendations from ResMed itself. They gave me the names of 4 people. And I don't know what's, I think mine's a neurologist from AIMS.
The right person to go to is a neurologist?
I'm not certain. I think there's a transfer from neurology to this because there was such a
Okay.
demand and unmet demand for it.
Right. Andy, any
So
suggestions on the nature, the kind of doctor? Do you go to a GP or?
The way it went down in my situation was that I went to my regular doctor, what they call a primary care physician,
Right.
and he referred me to a hospital with a sleep center. So when I showed up at the hospital, they knew exactly where to take me. I mean, I didn't actually have to meet with another doctor.
Yeah.
The technicians at the sleep center, they knew exactly what to do, and they set me up.
Yeah.
So it's maybe a little bit different here, but
Yeah.
it is actually a very smooth process.
Yeah. So maybe it's the first thing is to find out whether the hospitals here or in your
almost
country,
all,
wherever who's watching, do
yeah.
they have a sleep center or not? So that would be the first thing to see.
Even 20 years ago, this was not as widely known as
Yeah.
it is today. Right now, almost 1 billion people around the world have sleep apnea. So
Right.
that's 1 in 9.
Yeah.
The odds are quite high that you could be a victim of it too,
Yeah.
and not know about it.
Right.
So if you have a serious snoring condition, it doesn't hurt to get a sleep study done.
One more thing, Amanju, is that when I realized I had this and I didn't want to go through a sleep study, there were 2 other things I could have done. One is if you go to a dentist, they give you a plate that keeps your jaw at a certain angle. So when you lie back,
Yeah.
it doesn't fall back, that thing doesn't get obstructed. But it was serious. Of course, you can do surgery. And the third thing is, I bought this in America in the pharmacy. You have tapes which
You
keep your
can,
nose
yeah.
open.
Yeah.
And then you could, but that's only for mild snoring
Right.
and not for
Yeah, it didn't work for
severe.
me. Until I discovered the CPAP machine, I was running around ragged, trying to figure out how to not cure, but to ameliorate this thing. This was not going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
And so the only option I had at that point was to go with the machine.
Right.
I suspect surgery is an option, but it's a more radical option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not entirely necessary. If you can live with the CPAP,
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I mentioned an interesting accessory, Manju. It's I call it a cleaning chamber. It comes with various names. The company that that comes to mind right away is called So Clean. So Clean
So
2,
clean.
So Clean 3. There are many generations of that. Essentially, what you do is you take your mask and the portion of the tube that's attached to it, and you insert it into the chamber, close the lid, and it uses some kind of moistureless ionization cleaning process.
Right.
So it runs for about 8 minutes at first, and then there's a 2-hour period during which it rests, after which it can be used again. The equipment can be used again.
And you
And
have
you
to
do
clean.
that every day.
Oh, every day. Yeah. I just wanted to, I think I would like to end it by just asking my last question. What is the message that you would like to give to the viewers?
It's changed my life because I sleep and I am awake much better. If you're put off initially by the first few days of that mask feeling, stick with it. Even if you get 2 or 3 hours with a mask at night, it gets better and better and better. The last thing I want to say is it's expensive. It's very expensive. I think machine was about 80,000 alone. And then I get
And
it
this is
serviced.
10 years back, 80,000 10 years back,
Yeah,
or the
80,000.
cost?
And I get it serviced every year just to make sure the dust is so much dustier. You keep
Yeah.
it clean. So I don't know what you do if you don't have that much. And there's no insurance, I don't think, that covers it.
I'm in a little bit more fortunate position in that insurance does cover it.
Yeah.
Right.
And in fact, if anything, it's a little bit different even there, that the insurance will insist that you use it.
Yeah.
Again, it's the old concept of opportunity cost. If you use it, it's a low-cost solution to a major problem which could otherwise entail a lot more medical cost, both
Yeah.
for you as a
A
person
good
as well as
preventive. Yeah.
your
Yeah.
insurer.
Yeah.
But it, as like I think we have agreed, it is a simple solution. And if you can afford it and if you can live with it, it may save your life. It may give you a much better experience with things you do during the daytime. And also it is good for the mood and for the health generally.
Yeah. So it's a risk not worth taking, and you can be much more productive during the day, is what I hear
Yes.
both of you saying.
Don't put it off.
Yeah.
Don't put it
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Get it done.
Andy and Anu, thank you so much for sparing your time. Share your health story on healthstoriesspeak@gmail.com. healthstoriesspeak@gmail.com. Your story may help someone to ask the questions from their doctor and also save a life.